afro-headed, 5-foot black kid from the north side that I didn't know very well, and I handed him my key. And I said, here's the key to the studio. You let yourself in after school. You come over here and practice. And then when I get back, we'll sit down and we'll work on stuff together. And I'll leave lyrics on the piano. And if you find any you like, work on them. And I remember Prince kind of looked at me a little shocked when I handed him the key, because that was really a good gesture of trust and faith on that part. And he never betrayed it. He was always, very, very reliable and punctual. After I told him how to record, it was really funny. I'd reach up to the board and turn up a little treble. Then he'd reach up to the board and turn down a little treble. Then I'd reach up to the board and turn up an instrument. He'd reach up to the board and turn down a different instrument. And so our hands rolled over the place. It was like this octopus had spawned in the studio and had become a recording engineer. So even from the beginning, he had a lot of input, a lot of sense on the tonal textures, the balance, the way the sounds fit together, and he wanted to express that input. And I think as soon as he learned how to operate the equipment, he had the means to do that. Our focus was always to push the envelope of normality and try and get into things that we wouldn't normally do. We would bring flute players in for funk songs, and we'd use obscure instruments. We'd tune the drums very weird and slow the tape down. And anything that was not natural, not a normal process within the recording system back then, we would be playing with.
Prince's hunger for a recording contract increased as his immense talent became more apparent.
Prince came back from New York after I'd lined him up with his first record company meeting, and both of us were a little astounded that the record company hadn't heard a hit. We thought, well, we can hear it, how come we can't hear it? And so then the question became, what are we going to do to market you, Prince, now that our one main shot hasn't quite materialized the way we had hoped? And so I decided that what I needed to do was to try and find some talent, some managerial type talent here in town that I could use that would help me to promote this artist. And there was one gentleman named Owen Husman who was with a company that promoted folk artists. And I'd always liked Owen. We'd always got along pretty well. He'd always struck me as a very professional, kind of responsible individual. He was a businessman. He was doing this on an ongoing basis. He had experience. He had a suit. And I thought it was important that we could put somebody in a suit in front of the record company and have that kind of a presentation. So I went over to Owen and took my tape under my arm and sat down with him and I said, well, I've got something I want to share with you here.
Finally, after 5 days of him sitting on my couch in my reception area, I said, come on in. And he plays this tape. And I said, it's great. It's unbelievable. Who's the group? And he said, sit down. And I said, what do you mean? He said, sit down. So I said, well, who's the group? You got to tell me who the group is. We have to get to them. He said, it's not. He said, it's one guy writing everything, singing everything, playing all the instruments. And I just looked at him, in my business-like manner, and I said, does he live here? Does he live in Minneapolis? Well, when Chris Moon brought him over to my house for that first meeting, what I saw was a young kid who had a certain look in his eye. Now, if you ever see the early Little Richard photographs, there's sort of this, the rest of the group, he was in this group, and I can't remember right now what the name of the group was, I think before he became Little Richard, and there are all these guys sitting there in this group, and they're sort of looking off here, and they're looking up here, and they're smiling for that nice little photograph, and then there's the Little Richard picture, and those eyes are dead on, and there's fire in those eyes, and there is that, that I am going to make it look, and I know what I've got, and I'm getting there kind of look. Well, I saw that. The minute Prince walked in my door, I saw that look in his eyes, and I knew that this was the real deal. I found him to be extremely intelligent, and that, again, I think, when I saw how well-focused he was and how intelligent he was, and the fact that he was like 16 or 17 then or whatever, but he had the mind of like a 35-year-old, and that's how focused he was. That's when I made a decision that I was going to leave whatever. I owned 3 companies at that time, and I made a decision to walk away from those 3 companies and devote my life to them.
Husney started to work immediately on the marketing of Prince.
And my first thing was to, not sign him to some local record label and do some local schmokel kind of deal. But my first belief was, okay, we've got to do something here, and we've got to get our rear ends out to the West Coast. We've got to make a record deal for him as soon as possible, and it has to be first class. So we got on the plane, and we went out there, and we had our top number one attorney in the town, so we were first class all the way. Nothing was going to stop us. And we made presentations to all these labels, and we did present to ABC, RSO, Warner Brothers, CBS Records, and A&M Records. I do still have letter of rejection from Al Corey at RSO Records that passed on him saying that, they didn't feel that he was a talent. I do have a letter, I can't find the letter from ABC, but A&M, CBS, and Warner Brothers all offered us deals almost on the spot. Not quite, but it was almost on the spot. And so I got on the plane, came back to Minneapolis, and I can never sure. Here I was, this guy from this little, everybody thought was a cow town. They couldn't even figure out, well, how did you guys from this little cow town in the frigid north with no black people, why were you out here with this young black kid presenting this tape? And after they heard the tape, it was unbelievable. So, make a long story short, I came back to Minneapolis and I had the heads of all these record labels. I'm just this little guy from this cow town, right? My phone was ringing off the hook with the heads of all these major record companies. It was, for me, it was a dream come true. The deal that we came away with was a pretty spectacular deal for that time. The money was well into the six figures. In fact, if you added everything up together, it was over $1 million for that time, if you added in all the records and all the advances and everything. So we marched off to Sausalito, and making this record at I believe it was the record plant in Sausalito. And I got this nice home built into the side of this mountain, and Prince and myself and my wife and Andre Simone get on a plane and move out there and set up shop, and Andre and Prince are living with us, and our relationship was sort of surrogate parents at that point. I mean, we were cooking and cleaning and doing the hair and, washing the floors and doing the sheets, and I was managing them at the same time. I can remember at one point all these honchos from Los Angeles came up to San Francisco to see how we were doing in the studio, check up on us because they left us alone for our own devices. And so I believe it was the president of Warner Brothers and Russ Direct, who was VP of, now a senior VP of promotions at that time, I believe, two very big people from the company, fly up to San Francisco to see how we're doing. And I remember walking in the studio, and Prince was working away in the control room. They're listening to a playback of some down-tempo song, and there was no bass. Prince didn't want any bass in the song, so I remember Lenny said to him something like, well, shouldn't there be a bass guitar in that song? And Prince looks at him and he says, that's it, out, all of you out now, get out, that's it. And so I'm out in the lobby of the studio going, don't worry about it, he's doing a good job, He was throwing the whole entourage from the Warner Brothers out. Prince was right, and he was right in what he was doing, and nobody was going to get in his way to doing it.
Warner Brothers wanted Prince to put together a band from California. Instead, Prince went back home and started putting things together there.
All of a sudden, Prince got to deal with Warner Brothers, and they were down in Owens. Owen had a studio down by, Loring Park. So Prince had me come down there, and I get down there, and he's got like drums and everything set up. Just I came back from playing with Fleetwood Mac and everything. I was like, wow, man. All our dreams, we had met Santana,